Today we're going to start off with a simple exercise. So I want you to think of something that you really want to change about yourself, something that you don't like about yourself, that you've tried to change many times and have failed to do so. Hold that image in your mind, hold that belief in your mind, and now let it go. Now think of something that you really like about yourself, something you're really proud of, something that you worked really hard to attain, even better, something that you worked really hard to change about yourself, and ideally something that is even more difficult to do than the first thing that you haven't changed about yourself. Now, why were you able to achieve this second thing, but you aren't able to change that first thing? The answer is your self-concept. Self-concept is destiny. What we believe about ourselves, we will make into realities. We will move heaven and earth to be right. The one thing that your brain wants more than anything else is to be right, is to be congruent, is to have consistency between your beliefs and what is in the real world. So let's start off. We're going to take a couple examples of how our self-concepts influence our behavior and how we can maybe change our behaviors even with limiting self-concepts. So one of the strongest and most powerful self-concepts that some people have is that of smoking. So you'll often hear people say, well, I need to quit smoking, but I'm a smoker. I've always smoked. I'm a smoker. Those people are not going to quit smoking. If their self-concept is that they are a smoker, their days of giving up cigarettes are very, very numbered. However, once in a while, you will see people with that self-concept quit. And I want to investigate why. And I'm going to tell a little bit of a story of one of my friend's dads. So he grew up in a very harsh situation in Europe, and he started smoking when he was 13. He had a very strong self-concept that he was a smoker. So he moved to the United States, he married a woman, and she hated smoking. She wanted him to quit, but he never did. He tried gums, he tried patches, he tried replacements, he went to doctors, he tried all kinds of things to quit smoking. And it wasn't for a lack of effort, it wasn't for a lack of desire, and it wasn't for a lack of strategy. He had all of those things, but he never did quit smoking. Until when he was 34, he had his first son, and he never smoked a cigarette ever again. Why? Well, he had such a strong self-concept that he was a smoker. So no matter what he tried, he wasn't able to change it. But then came along this different self-concept. Now he was a father, and to him, fathers don't smoke. That was his self-concept, his belief about what it meant to be a parent. And that was a stronger self-concept in him. That was a more important self-concept than being a smoker, and he was able to give it up relatively easily. So when we have these competing self-concepts, sometimes we don't need to change our self-concepts, we just need to strengthen the more empowering ones. So let's take another limiting self-concept that often people have, and that is of depression or anxiety. So this is very complicated. I'm actually going to do a video about whether or not the disease model is good or bad, and it of course depends on context. But oftentimes people have a self-concept that I am a depressed person. I am an anxious person. Well, what's going to happen if that's our self-concept? If that's our self-concept, we're going to look for confirming evidence, we're going to find it, and we're going to be depressed and anxious. We are going to make ourselves anxious because that's what we believe about ourselves. It's not that we want it. We don't want to be depressed or anxious. I'm not suggesting that anyone is consciously choosing that. What I am suggesting is that that is what our belief about what we're going to do in different situations, that is what is going to happen. But we can change that. We can remember that we're not always depressed and anxious, even if we have very strong anxiety and depression. We're not always those things, and we can use other self-concepts to maybe root those out. So my mother, for example, has very, well, I won't say severe anxiety anymore, but she certainly had very severe anxiety when I was a child. So if somebody intimidated her, if somebody told her something negative about her, she would react in a very anxious way. Except if somebody said something about me, or if somebody said something about my brother, or if somebody attacked us, she didn't act very anxious. Now, yes, there was probably still some anxieties and she may have overreacted to some things, but why? Why was she able to overcome massive anxiety? We're talking really severe anxiety. How was she able to overcome that? Because she had a self-concept that was orders of magnitude more powerful than her self-concept of anxiety. And that was of being a mother. She was a mother and she was going to make it right. There was no way that she was going to allow the self-concept of being anxious or even the actual feeling of being anxious overcome the self-concept that she was a mother and she did right for her children. She was always going to allow that to win. So, we can use other self-concepts. I'm not saying that was necessarily the healthiest one, but we can use these competing self-concepts to change the ones we want to change. And lastly, the self-concept that most of us have that is very limiting is about our fitness. So, unfortunately, 70% of Americans are now overweight, and I would bet that the vast majority of them view themselves as unhealthy, inactive people. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should say to yourself, I am a fit person, if you've never been fit and you're overweight now. That probably isn't going to work. Your mind won't believe it. But what you can do is change it so that you can change your self-concept just a little bit. Maybe you're not a fit person, but you could be an active person. Maybe you're not a fit person, but you could be a healthy person. Take whatever is true that you actually do believe about yourself and try to strengthen it. So rather than trying to change that self-concept that I'm not fit, just try to strengthen that self-concept that I am active. And I'm going to use a study here that I think is really illustrative about self-concepts. And it's called the Chambermaid study. And this is, of course, Ellen Langer. Who else would I cite a study from, right? But she did a study with one of her students where they took hotel maids. And these women are on their feet for 8 to 10 hours a day. They're walking a lot. They're doing all kinds of physical activity. They're lifting stuff. They're bending over. They're making beds. They're doing all kinds of physical activity. And they asked these hotel maids, how active are you? And the vast majority of them said they got no exercise at all, which is pretty interesting because all they did was exercise all day, right? So they split the group in two. Half the group they just told, hey, it's important to exercise, health is important, blah, 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 all the stuff that they already knew. The other group, they said, here's how you actually already are exercising. This is like, making a bed is like doing a rowing machine at the gym. Doing this is like doing this thing at the gym. You're walking 4 miles a day. You're actually meeting the Surgeon General's health guidelines for exercise. They told them how much exercise they were already getting. At the end of the study, the women who had been told how much exercise they were already getting lost an average of 10 pounds. They were asked whether they changed their exercise habits. They said no. They were asked if they had changed their eating habits. They said no. Did they change any of these things consciously? I was going to say no, but maybe they did, right? And that's fine too. That's great if they actually said to themselves, no, you know what? I do want to do it. But the point is, whether it was conscious or not, their self-concept won out. They realized that they were active people. And that changed their self-concept. That changed their belief about themselves, and they became more active. So whether it was subconsciously, they just moved more, they put a little more vigor and effort into it. But we know that if we have a self-concept of being an active, energetic person, we walk differently. We hold ourselves differently than if we have a self-concept of being an inactive person. So there are a lot of things about self-concept that are very complicated. And one technique that I want you to try is from Nathaniel Branden, who actually, I didn't even put these two things together until I started making this video, but Nathaniel Branden was actually the first one to suggest the idea of self-concept being destiny. And in his book, highly recommend 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, he has an activity that he asks people to do called sentence completion, where you start with a sentence stem and then you complete it with as many things as possible. So, things like, if I were to raise my self-acceptance today, I would ... and then you fill it in with as many things as possible. And the simplest exercise, I think, is to just start with the sentence, I am, and try to fill in 6 to 10 completions there to finish that sentence. I am blank. I am blank. And if you get tired of that, isolate it a little more. So in work, I am blank. In regards to my health, I am blank. In regards to my family, I am blank. And that will reveal some maybe surprising self-concepts that you have about yourself. And rather than trying to change the most powerful self-concepts, just try to shift them a little bit to serve you better. Because oftentimes, even empowering self-concepts, if we hold them too strongly, can be detrimental. For example, a lot of people have self-concepts about being successful, but if they're too strong, yes, they move heaven and earth to be what they think is successful, but then maybe they neglect their relationships, maybe they neglect their families. So we don't want any one self-concept to be too strong, but we want to be aware of them so that we can mindfully adjust them, mindfully strengthen the ones that we need to strengthen to empower us, and maybe soften some of the ones that don't empower us. So this is a very complicated topic. I thought about making multiple videos of it, and maybe I will. But I really encourage you to try that exercise, just trying to find 6 to 10 things that you think you are in different arenas of your life, and that may reveal some self-concepts that are either empowering you or holding you back, and maybe what you can do about it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you'll try that exercise, and we'll see you next time.